Hi, everyone. We are the Enablement Group. I'm Josh Lambert. I'll be your main host here, but the rest of the section is also largely in attendance. And so hopefully we'll be hearing from a number of folks today. And a quick reminder that this is a public live stream. So just asking questions and answering, keep that in mind. And we'll get started with our first question. Jason, do you want to voice it over?
Sure. I went looking through the slides, and on slide 3, it shows that the Geo team will be taking the work for backup and restore with a note as this is as of fiscal year 22. For the clarity of others who may watch and be wondering, which team is currently responsible for that work until that transition time?
Yeah, hi, Jason. This is Fabian, and I think Josh can pitch in. But so the backup and store category is part of Enablement and was grouped under Geo. We've done some initial work on the vision for this, but given the current position that the Geo team is in and the priorities, what this means is we're not going to implement a lot of new feature requests or move this forward, given our current focus. We are trying to provide sort of bug fixes and support as best as we can. Obviously, we're always happy for others to help, but this is where we currently are with that.
Yeah, to come a little bit further, prior to the Geo team picking up backup and recovery, it didn't have a home. So we wanted to have a home, but yeah, with the current throughput on the Geo team and I think the current focus on disaster recovery, it's just it's not going to be able to get prioritized here in the near term, Jason. But that's a good question, and certainly if others can pick up any backup recovery items they feel passionate about, we're always accepting merge requests. So. Does that help answer your question, Jason?
Yep, I've been working on backup and restore in the past, so I'm good. I'm making sure everybody else knows.
If you're looking for a distraction, perhaps one day, maybe pick up an issue or two would be great.
Right, because I need a distraction.
So we have no other questions so far, so please go ahead and get them added in. We'll wait another minute, a couple minutes here in case folks have some questions they'd like to answer. I'm sure our slide deck is not that comprehensive, so I'm sure there are questions out there and we'd love to get them. So please write it up or just feel free to hop in and voice over and we can write it up as you go along and talk about it.
Hey, Josh, this is Joe. I've got a question regarding the Orchestrator roadmap. This is the first time learning about it, so just curious if you wouldn't mind giving a high-level description of what that is and what the goals are there.
Yeah, Larissa, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So this is a project the distribution team started working on probably a couple of months back. The idea behind it is that we had a lot of different tools that were being developed within the company to automate deploying GitLab at scale. And we wanted to consolidate on a single tool that we can productize and make available to customers.
Yeah, to perhaps provide a little more color there. Most of our customers with any scale beyond one need to have some level of automation in managing their GitLab deployments. If you look at, for example, like the 5,000 or 10,000 reference architecture, it's 20 plus nodes of GitLab. And so that's really kind of unmanageable if you try to do it by hand. And so we have to provide a tool for our customers to deploy and manage those. Otherwise, they do what they do today, which is they take it upon themselves and write their own. So when talking to our customer advisory board, everyone had some automation around their deployments. And it'd be great if they didn't have to write that themselves, and we could provide one that works, and that we know works, and that we test. And beyond that, also provisions the reference architectures, because we know those are good, sort of the happy path for deploying GitLab. So we can hopefully put some guardrails up and reduce, so people have better deployments out of the gate with fewer problems, and similarly can also reduce the amount of time it takes people to stand up some of these larger multi-node instances that they might need.
And just to answer your question on the roadmap, so currently we're working on, we're focused on internal dog feeding of the tool. So it's currently deploying GitLab, so deploying nodes that will support high availability on GCP. And the next step is to add support for automatically creating geo primary and secondary clusters. And then, so after that, we are looking for feedback from the geo team on any incremental improvements we can make there. And then from there, we'll start looking at how to better service our customers. Probably the next step there would be to add support for deploying on AWS. And then I think there's still some work there to work with the support team to figure out how we're going to best support the tool as well.
Okay, thanks. That was going to be my next question, is AWS coming afterward?
Yeah, I think it's probably something like AWS, then on-prem, and then building in support for automatically deploying reference architectures where a user might plug in their scale, like 1,000 users, and we'll make an opinionated recommendation on the nodes and configuration that are required for that.
Thanks.
Josh, I'm next, but no need to answer that one. I asked the exact same question as Joe, so I'm good.
And I'm personally really excited about this project. So I think it'll help a lot of our customers. We had our last virtual cab, and we had quite a few questions on how people can utilize this, even though they had already, in some cases, their own automation. And so that was interesting to me, that they would be willing to kind of spend the effort to cut over. So that was great to hear demand from existing customers as well for this. And I think we've also seen really strong results from existing customers moving over to a reference architecture and getting onto one of those topologies, as opposed to the one that they built previously. So I know we had one large customer move over recently, had significantly faster performance, better reliability, and just general better user experience. And so if we can help make that process easier as well, that'd be great. And also make sure people get out of the gate in these architectures, that would also be great as well. So.
And I'll just, so this, Fabian, just a final comment on this from the geo perspective. We're really looking forward to this because testing geo for upgrades or for failovers or other tasks is usually involving a lot of infrastructure spinning up, and having that automated is something that will improve our productivity quite significantly. So we're very excited for it. And I think this will also be a good sort of dog fooding effort. So big shout out to the distribution team and Larissa for working on it.
Thanks. Christopher?
Yeah, I don't know how new North Star metrics are, but it feels like it's kind of been a focus recent weeks. You know, this team's pretty diverse as far as the different things they're working on. So for me, it's a little harder to kind of get vision of, you know, what would be important from a product perspective. So, you know, what I'm trying to do is you could go certainly look through the documentation and see all the different things that we have listed, but I'd be curious your perspective on, you know, what's important and what we should be thinking about on the engineering side.
Yeah, so I think in in many cases, we're trying to capture activity or some type of value being delivered to users. And then with supporting metrics, we're also trying to make sure that we have the data we need to help make informed decisions about those. And so depending on which one you look at, like memory, for example, would be how many queries we can process per like compute dollar. And then underneath that, we have other information on how to better parse out like how we arrive at that number. And so that's largely the structure of like the North Star metric and supporting metrics. And so we have quite a few, as you mentioned. It's I think for us, it's not always about like a user taking some action in the UI that generates value. And so I think we have probably more supporting metrics in other places to try and help provide more context about how these things, how our services operate. As far as I think high level, what's important, if you go down to the last slide of that deck, slide 11, it has these sort of section wide enablement North Stars. And that can give you a little higher level picture, I think, of what we're trying to achieve here, or what we think is important for our customers. And that is namely the responsiveness of the instances or the ACDEX, the uptime of the services, how recent the update of the version of GitLab is, how many new hosts we have, or how many new instances of GitLab we have deployed, and then also the number of search queries to make sure I incorporate the search group into those. That's, I think, the real high level metrics that we're trying to move the needle on, and many parts of our section will roll up to these. Like the AppDex will hopefully get better for people with multiple, a geographically distributed user base by having geo replicas out there. And so geo can, for example, drive down the AppDex, and obviously with disaster recovery, it can also help promote uptime and things of this nature. So I hope, does that help answer your question?
Yeah, it gives me some visibility into how you're thinking about it, Josh. Really appreciate it.
And we'll get these into the handbook. So apologies if there are currently issues in the deck. We're moving them into the handbook and into the section and category strategies.
I think I'm next. So I wanted to ask, is there any kind of tracking for how feature complete we think our Helm charts are currently versus where they are aiming to be? Is there an epic that goes along with them, especially with regards to being feature complete on July 31st? But Larissa has already answered that and put the links in the documentation for me. So thank you.
Yeah, I would love your feedback on that. We have the viable to complete epic has more detail in there. The complete deliverable is still really light on details. So we're still defining what that means.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, one other note here that the highlight is the infrastructure group of who operate GitLab.com is also moving parts of GitLab.com over into Kubernetes, which we're really excited about, because that'll of course help us dog food our charts in a real serious way. And so we're working through that process as well. They have moved some limited services over already, and it was really helpful in pointing out some challenges that we had around the registry and some of the liveness checks and things like that. And so looking forward to continuing that project. And I think if GitLab.com can run on Kubernetes or largely on Kubernetes, that would be a real good proof point that we're lovable potentially, or at least complete. But as I think Larissa noted in those epics, that there are still some feature gaps that we have today around like pages, for example. And so some of these are challenging in the sense that it's not always the distribution team who is responsible for fixing them. So we're kind of the downstream side of things, but those projects are also moving forward as well. So it's a little longer timeline and necessarily strictly in distribution team's control when all these things land, just to highlight that. Cool. Mark?
Huh. It's weird. I recently ran into a couple emails. I can't find them on some orchestrators. One was from OpenShift. Then I thought I could have swore I saw one from Google, but I can't find them on the net now. I don't know. Do they exist, or is it just me? Am I dreaming?
I was just searching on Google too, and I couldn't find anything on the Google one.
Yeah, that's weird. So is that an upcoming product or space, or just a capability? Do anybody know? No.
I'm not sure about
Okay.
the Google Orchestrator.
I'll look it up. I'll find my emails that I
Yeah, I've
have.
never heard of Google Orchestrator before. When it comes to OpenShift Orchestrator, OpenShift itself is actually an orchestration system.
Okay.
Most people don't think of OpenShift Orchestrator as a thing. It's just one of the things OpenShift does. It's a way to orchestrate both containers as well as actually VMs when you're using that in combination with other tools related to it. It actually has the ability to do VMs, believe it or not. But the orchestrator, the GitLab orchestrator, is intended to actually provide a way to deploy large and complex deployments of applications, like the suite that is GitLab, that's covering all of the components at scale. And whether that's in multi-zones or in multiple deployment methods. So for example, you can deploy to GCP in 2 zones with Kubernetes clusters actually running some of the application work. That's an intended item. At the moment, you can't deploy in that fashion, but it's in a roadmap with a work to be done. So the intent is to continue to be cloud agnostic in terms of how we do things, but we have to add every cloud as we go, but without also being relying on any particular piece of technology either.
Thanks, Jason.
Was your question, like curiosity, on the fact that like it's a space that we're going into? Like I'd love to learn more about sort of what led to the question in your mind as far as the orchestrator versus other.
Just because I received an email about that. Orchestrator was the, and now I heard you talk about it for the second time. So I got to find the email because I think it is what Jason just talked about. And because they talked about being agnostic. I think it was OpenShift. Cloud agnostic. I'll hunt it down.
Thanks. I was just curious. I think there is potential for overlap between orchestration and which is like Kubernetes and open stack and things like that, and what we're doing, and it could potentially be a source of confusion, like as in getting into that space. But this is pretty particularly focused on deploying GitLab across a number of clouds and maintaining it.
Just wanted to throw one more wrinkle in there that right now our orchestrator project is focused directly on omnibus deployments, not cloud native. Just wanted to call that out specifically so you don't have any confusion. Thank you.
Interesting.
Yeah, MVC is definitely with what most people are doing at large scale right now, which is the deployment of omnibus. As you can see in the slides, the number of installations that we have for the Helm charts, it remains a very small percentage of our overall installations. That percentage is growing over time. However, we have a larger target aiming at omnibus. So this is what we're doing for MVC.
And then just on OpenShift, Mark, there is some work happening to deploy GitLab on OpenShift and GitLab runners. There is an Epic to track that, but Red Hat has been working on an operator, and Chris Timberlake has been helping with that.
Oh, now maybe it's operator. I got to see that. Okay, thanks.
That Red Hat operator, I think, is for the GitLab runner.
They've got some new work.
Yeah, there's.
Oh, sorry, Larissa, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a second phase that's for deploying GitLab itself. But the initial focus was on the runner.
Can we get that linked?
Yes, I will find the Epic and link.
Awesome. So we'll pause for if there's any more questions, and if you have one, feel free to just voice it over. And if not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate all the questions as always. And you know how to find us on that slide 1 in the various Slack channels if you have any questions that come up between now and the next GC. But thanks again, and thanks to the team for all the great work and for helping jump in and answer these questions.
Thanks, enablement section.